So welcome back to this round table. For this discussion about regenerative practice, we have three stakeholders from three different fields of architecture. So the first one is Marc Barra from Institut Paris Region. And he will present, maybe you can present yourself in two words first.
Yes, I'm an ecologist and I'm based in Paris. I work for the Paris Region Agency for Biodiversity.
And we are happy to welcome Oscar Hernandez from the Living Building Challenge. If you want to say some words.
Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'm Oscar Hernandez. I am one of the persons who is leading the Living Building Challenge in France. So this is an organization that is actually create the first environmental practice in the world. So we are actually leading this great opportunity here in France with a group of friends. So yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. And the third person is Stephen Ware, who already presents before about biomimetic wood facades. And I guess he will join in few seconds. So the goal of this roundtable is to understand the gap between restorative practice and research. And so today we are going to illustrate with different case study and different practices, different projects in order to understand these different gaps and how can we overcome these challenges. So maybe the first question I would like to ask you is, as a stakeholder of architecture and urban planning, how do you integrate restorative practice? In your practice? Yeah, how is it integrated? And if you have in mind some case, could be nice to illustrate as well. Oh, maybe Marc here first.
Yes, thank you. So I work in ecology. I'm not a researcher, but we do some research, and actually we work in between research in ecology and practitioners. And what we do was very well explained by Frédéric Chartier on his presentation, how ecologists and architects can work together. And what we do is just actually providing some scientific evidence about biodiversity, about the species requirement, about the life cycle of species, for example, and trying to translate that into their practices. So it's bringing knowledge from science to actions. And so there's many different ways to do that. We do some research project. For example, I will talk about a project on green roof that we have done for 3 years. And now we have a lot of elements, a lot of inputs, scientific inputs, to be able to translate it into the design, conception, and management of this green architecture.
And yeah, or maybe you want to continue and present the green roof, or maybe Oscar. Yeah, can you tell more about the Living Building Challenge in France, and how do you implement that in your practice?
Yeah, of course. The Living Building Challenge, it's a group of people actually here in France. We are a group of people, and we are communicating about this environmental practice. The Living Building Challenge is to be really short in the explanation. The living is like a flower. So every building has to be designed, or a project, like a flower to generate the less environmental and social impact for the environment. So actually, we with this group of people, we create a group, the first living collaborative in France, and today we are more than 40 companies that are really interested in this environmental practice. So we are presenting some different subjects every 2 months. So if you are interested, it is possible to participate, to see what it is the good practices that are happening here in France, because there are a lot of things that are really interested and it could be used for tomorrow if we want to pursue in a certification like the Living Building Challenge. So yeah.
What is the profile of these stakeholders who are, you say, the 40 people involved in the LBC?
Yeah, there are different kind of companies. There are architects, there are construction companies. We are also engineers, architects, urban planners. We have a lot of different kind of profiles in this group. The most important part is that we are trying to recover all these good practices that are happening now, like Marc was saying about all this thing in Paris. This is really interesting for us to see how these good practices we can use it for tomorrow to validate or to implement the certification. So it is really open to everybody who is convinced in this environmental issue and all the things that are happening now in the climate change and everything.
Okay, so it's stakeholders from all parts of the design process, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
And how I know that there are some challenges in order to apply the Living Building Challenge to French legislation or French standards. Is it a challenge you are working on, or in order to transfer initial design brief from the LBC to the French statement?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question. It's a difficult question because we know we have the regulation in France, and there are really good things with the regulation. But in the same time, if we want to push the design of the buildings, we need to push forward the regulations. And this is the most difficult part, to try to convince public or organizations, the mayors, the people who is working behind this law. So this is actually the most difficult part. So we are trying to really create this discussion with these people to try to modify these rules, because we have to deal with them.
And do you have both an example of which point is the most difficult to overcome in terms of regulation, in order to have this regenerative design process? And also, Marc, if you have in mind example where you faced difficulties in order to overcome standards.
Yes, I have many examples. I think the first one about this question of biodiversity is that the solutions are different depending on the scale we are looking at. The building scale, the district scale, and the city scale, for example. And just for a reminder, when we study biodiversity, the situation of nature now in dense areas like Paris is very bad. At the moment, we observe that during the last 10 years, the abundance of birds, for example, has dropped by 40%. It's even more for some species, like the house sparrow. The house sparrow in Paris, maybe you heard about that. It's almost 75% in abundance of species that have disappeared. So actually today we can say that the metropolis of Paris and the metropolis as well as Paris are too dense to integrate nature. So I would say that the first thing is to understand that we have to protect the existing green spaces. to protect the connection between these spaces, what we call the ecological corridors. And then not only think about the solution at the building scale. And this is a tricky issue, actually, because I visited so many projects that are really interesting by integrating nature. For example, some building with a lot of vegetation, with roofs, with walls, etc. But they were actually built at the wrong place. They were built on a wasteland that used to be a place for nature. They were built on a green space, for example. And so I'm not saying that it's not interesting. We have to do what we can at our scale. But yeah, there is a real need to integrate the different scale with one and each other. And at the moment in the Paris region, there's a big challenge of protecting soils from being built. So that comes with the legislation, of course, with the urban planning documents. And we used to say in ecology that at the city scale, we need at least 30% to 45% of space of nature for an environmental stability. Below, biodiversity cannot stand anymore in the city. So this makes us understand the way we have to work on.
This percentage you say 30 to 40% can integrate roofs and facades as well, or you are talking about soil? And
I'm talking about soils, plain soil. I don't know if we say that in English, but I'm talking about green space. I love green roof, and I did study them, but it's I'm used to say that it's a bonus for nature. It's if we do it, it would be better. But the first thing to do is protect the green space in the ground.
Okay. So Steven, you are back in the round table, and your microphone is off. Can you turn it on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hello again. I'm really sorry. I have no idea what happened, but I just texted you to say I'm back on. So
we started the round table by asking about restorative practice. So we have your presentation before, and do you have cases or example to share with us about restorative practice you did as an architect?
Yeah, we did. I think it's fascinating to start with one approach, which is the integration of biodiversity. We did a fairly large redevelopment to the north of Paris in an area called Gennevilliers. It was once the largest site of gas, the largest gas works in Western Europe. And so there was a lot of pollution, and there was this problem with the water from the water table from the Seine being very close by. So the water was very, very close to the surface. So you have this mixture of polluted soil and then this risk of water coming up. What we were able to do as a general approach for the redevelopment of the entire site was to use water as a positive aspect. So we argued in favor of keeping groundwater for a number of reasons. The groundwater in order to encourage biodiversity, obviously, but it also helps to keep the general temperature through evaporation, the general temperature of the air down. It absorbs dust, it absorbs pollution. Water can be made to do all sorts of things. So rather than see this as a threat, we actually used it as a restorative vector. And I think, again, Frédéric Chartier was talking about use the water runoff in the buildings. Think about this as a resource. Don't just divert it, send it somewhere else. Use it as a resource. And I think that restorative approaches have to start with a particular aspect. Looking at biodiversity is a great way of analyzing what a site can potentially become and what do you need in order to get biodiversity there. Obviously, you need water. Obviously, you need soil. The deeper the soil, the better it is. So that certainly was a big lesson and eye-opener working on that site on that sort of scale. Now we're actually very interested in the microbiodiversity, the microbiome of the city. talking to researchers like Pascal Jean Lopez at the Musée National d'Histoire Naturelle, who talk about this incredible, the biofilms that you find in the street, these tiny, tiny microorganisms that link together that play an enormous role in the kind of underlying basis of what enables biodiversity on a richer level to come. It's rather like a sort of another version of the soil. But again, I'm not a biologist, so I can't go into it. But we must resist the temptation to sterilize, to asepticize our cities. And we have to welcome the presence of nature, even though we sort of built up this idea of the city in the 20th century as being sort of separate from nature. It has to be a different nature.
Yeah, but yeah, biodiversity is one of the a petal, maybe we can say, of the living building challenge. And you also talk about water, which is also a petal, a very important petal of the living building challenge certification. Yeah, maybe Oscar, you would like to respond something about this, and how important are these 20 different petals? Or maybe we can remind to the participants what are the kind of the petals of the LBC.
Yeah, of course. The living building challenge, it's 7 petals. And for each petal, we have a little of different kind of imperatives. So we have 20 imperatives. So for example, we have the petal place, after we have water, energy, health and well-being. We have also beauty. Might try to remember everything. And we have also materials. This is actually one of the most difficult petals that we have. And the last one is equity. So the Living Building Challenge is a holistic approach. It's a combination of all these petals. We have to think in what is going to happen in all the design parts of the building. So you were talking about the water petal. It could be one of the most difficult petal of the Living Building Challenge. But Olivier said, we need to think what we have and what we can do with this resource. So for the petal water, the thing is what we have. We have rainwater. We have water in the ground. So we need to use this water and not to try to create this closed loop to really reduce this environmental impact of the water consumption, because we spend a lot of water. Water is not expensive, so this is actually one of the difficult part of the water, but it's actually one of the resources that it could be gone in 2050. We have a lot of water, man. We don't have enough potable water, and this is actually the most difficult part. So yeah.
Do you have in mind a case of study in Paris, in France, you can talking about where some researcher or architects are currently working?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking in a project that we are working with in a group of students from a engineering school in Paris, and it's funny because it's in Gennevilliers. We have this building. It's a very huge building. It's like a wall, and the main idea was to destroy the building and to create a new one. But we were thinking on why we have to destroy this building, because in Gennevilliers we have a lot of things that is really difficult. The problem is not the building. The problem is the environmental thing, the relation with all these green spaces and the building, the people who are living in the building and the outdoor spaces. So we try to say to the students, keep the building and do it something with the environmental, all the outdoor spaces, with the water that we have everywhere, the green spaces, the green roof, all this part, and to try to replace all this parking, because there are a lot of parkings everywhere in Gennevilliers, to replace this with vegetable spaces. This is only the idea that we had at the beginning, and these 20 students, for a group of 20 students, they start to imagine what this building is going to be in 2030, 2050, and 2010, and 60 or 80. And they keep the building, and they start to work with all these outer spaces, create this connection with people, because this is the most important part. We want to restore this environment. We need to work with the people who is living in this park, and to give to these people all these things that they need, all this vegetation, all this water, all these environmental things, to try to restore this place by the people themselves. So actually, it's a really interesting project. It is working on. It's a project that from the students, and not a real project, but it could be done. It could be give a lot of ideas to the mayor. This is the most important part.
Yeah, so it's a global approach. And can you, Marc, is it the same where you are when you are working as an ecologue? Do you feel also that you need to have a global approach for instance, the rooftop you were talking about before? Do you work with these different petals, or not petals, but like water, energy, as an ecologue also, which is initially not the main topic of an ecologue, but
yes, of course, it's a good question, and it's a way to distinguish what we call ecologue in French, ecologist, and what we call naturalists. There are people in ecology that describe the species and that focus on biodiversity, I would say, and there are what we call ecologue that have probably a broader approach, and I try to integrate all these dimensions, and everything is connected in nature. The water cycle, the soil, the vegetation, the species that go in these ecosystems. So we need to have this broader approach. We use a lot of concepts in our daily work, which is nature-based solutions, and one of the parameter of those nature-based solutions is the multifunctionality. Nature-based solution for climate regulation and adaptation, nature-based solution for biodiversity, for water regulation. So yes, we try to connect different projects. I thought about an example. We were talking about water, and there's a very nice project in the north of Paris, in the city of Gonesse. It's nearby the airport, Charles de Gaulle. That's a place where they used to experiment a lot of urbanization, so a lot of soil sealing and paving, and it used to be flooded every year. At the same time, a lot of houses flooded, and what they did is that they created a new urban wetland that works as a flood expansion area. So all the water that is coming from the urban area, from the paved areas, just flood in this new floodplain, in this wetland. And that's a good example of a multifunctionality. It's a new place for water regulation. It's 12 hectares. So 12 hectares that can accumulate more than 50,000 cubic meters of water. But that's also a new place for the people that were lacking green space in this part of Paris region, and it's a place for biodiversity, of course, and it's really interesting, and it's like an experimentation of those nature-based solutions, because of course we were talking about the problems that we can have with biodiversity. Of course, the people say, "Wow, a wetland, we will have mosquitoes. It's dark at night, so it's insecure, etc." But we are doing with some colleagues a naturalistic survey, a monitoring of species, and we show that there's not more mosquitoes than in other parts of the city, because here there are the predators of the mosquitoes. So it's a whole ecosystem that has been created, and it works. And I forgot to answer about green roof, but I talked enough.
So what are the main tools you use in your practice for regenerative practice and all the cases you were talking about right before? Do you have specific tools, specific grids? You work with working groups? Do you have a process, or each project is different and you try and start with something new? Or
okay, I can answer. Yeah, the first tool, I would say, if we can call that a tool that we use, is training. So bringing together urban planners, landscape designers, architects, and ecologists together, and for 1 day or 2 days talk together, train, bring some scientific knowledge, and then the urban planners bring back what they know, etc. So I think the training is one of the tool that we have to use. About the success of these solutions, I can now talk about the green roof, because what we did on this project, it's a 3-year project about the evaluation of green roof. But it's more than green roof. It's a methodology to try to calculate and quantify the benefits of your solution in your building. And what we did is that we evaluate the attractivity of green roof for biodiversity, the water retention capacity of green roof, the pollination service of green roof, etc. And all this data that we accumulate now will be useful for managers, will be useful for designers. And so I'm able to say, for example, today that if you want to have a green roof that can store water, you will have to build a substrate of at least 8 centimeters. And if you want to catch a heavy rain, a storm, then you will have to go up to 30 centimeters. And the same if you want to have a richness of species that is high enough. We see in our research that the richness of plants on green roof will increase with the substrate, but there's a threshold at 30 centimeters. Above, the species richness doesn't increase anymore. So this kind of data, this kind of knowledge will be useful for stakeholders. That's one of the tools that we can use.
Okay, so it's quantify. Yeah, that helps a lot.
Yeah. Evidence of benefits, and not just. I think Frédéric Chartier told that. He say it's not nature and building is not just green painting. If you read on a lot of books, we know the menu. We have to green the roof. We have to green the walls. But how? What are the parameters? What species should we use in this context, etc. So this is an evaluation that is necessary.
And it's endemic species all the time.
Well, I know a lot of ecologists say we should only use local species and endemic species. I would say I'm more balanced about that. We have to, in priority, use the species that are adapted to the environment, to the context. But I think also we have to let people use species that have other benefits, such as beauty is one of the parameters that you told us. So I like the mix between horticultural species and local species. But yes, it's one way to design them. And about the roof, Philippe Clergeau from the museum and Frédéric Madre designed what they call a wide roof. It's a green roof where nothing has been planted. And that's also what we call biodiversity, is letting nature go on the roof by itself, like a wilderness, and not planting anything. So that could be a question for us. Should we always do something for nature? Should we always plant? Should we always design? or should we just bring some little energy and let nature do the job?
Okay. And yeah, interesting response. We move from the initial topic. Maybe Oscar, about the living building challenge. You precise before the 7 petals, but what are the grids or the tools you used to work?
Yeah, we are doing something that maybe something that is already done by a lot of people, architects and engineering companies, is to speak with people who lives in this place, people who is going to live in these buildings, and to try to understand what they need, what is the actual situation, the real problems, and to try to solve that. We use the Living Building Challenge as a tool, not only as a certification. It is most to try to define where are the guides to design in a good way. So I think the most important tool is to speak with people. This is to complete more the thing that Marc said is really important, that all the things that Marc said, but also to complete this strategy is to speak with people who is living in these buildings, or who is going to live in the buildings. And in the same way as the Living Building Challenge defines, to try to also to integrate in this discussion the facility managers, because all these places, all these buildings needs to be maintained by companies, by people. If they don't understand what we did, it's going to be difficult to ensure, to guarantee the functioning of the building. So I think this tool, the first is to discuss with people, and the other one is to discuss with people who is going to manage the buildings.
Okay, and in France, for instance, who would be the best stakeholder in order to monitor the buildings, the regenerative building using the LBC, you think?
I don't know. It's a tough question. I would say we need we need architects, we need a facility manager, we need construction companies, we need people who is living these places, who is using these places. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to talk about restore, to talk about, I don't know, performance, energy performance, or I don't know. We need every people,
all of them.
Yeah, I think it's important. Maybe it's a very. My answer is really general, but I don't know. For me, it's the most important part.
Thank you. And Steven, about the tools and methods, you have explored a restorative approach in many different projects with integrating also biomimetics. So do you have specific tools and methods you use, or do you change, or is it researching, practicing at the same time, or?
Yes, it is. It's I think the 7 petals is a very interesting model, because we sort of have 4, and I can see how our 4 petals can be placed on top of the 7 petals. And I think Tangram, who we heard from earlier, they also have 4 kind of tools or intellectual tools, 4 approaches which they try to use in different measures according to the site. No 2 buildings are ever really the same. Every building is a new prototype. But I think in terms of how you use the tools, once you've decided what they should be and how you can name them, we need to do research in parallel to the actual practice of building, designing and building. We don't have time to do the research when we have a particular project which is starting. We have to have the research going on in parallel. When the fruit of that research starts to become available and transferable into the conventional building world, that's when we do the transfer. And we're quite opportunistic. When we have a project which looks like it can take this the research, then we transfer it. We don't apply it as like the DNA of every project. That's almost impossible, unfortunately, in architecture, because the clients are different, the size is different, the usage is different, the economy, the amount of money, which the budget is different. So we tend to work as 4 research streams. When the research streams show us that we have a fit, we create the link and we try to get that into the project. But I just wanted to go back, because I mean, I think the biodiversity, what is local with biodiversity, local species? I mean, I'm getting back to that subject which you were talking about. The Canadians are doing a lot of work, and I think this is happening in France too. What trees do we plant today? We don't even know what trees are going to survive with the climate change. So, you know, we can say, let local species, you know, they're going to be resilient, we know that, but we should be planting new things just to test what is going to survive over the years to come. So, you know, I think we have to have a very, very open view towards what sort of plants we integrate into our cities, into our buildings, because we don't know what's going to happen in the years to come. We have to just test some things out, you know. And again, this is the Anthropocene in a way. The positive side, as I can see it, there will be a new profile of nature which evolves with the city, and we have to just be very watchful and mindful about how it evolves with us. I mean, look at the project in China, which has these amazing balconies, you know, with the vegetation just grew like wildfire. Nobody wants to go there because they're afraid of mosquitoes. That's not the mosquitoes' fault. That's not the plant's fault. And I would even say that's not the architect's fault. That's because they didn't program the maintenance in there and what to do with the different plants. So they provoked a biophobic effect when they should have had a biophilic effect. So, you know, that gets back to what you guys were saying. You know, you have to go well ahead of the game and figure out, once this life is there, how is it going to maintain itself or be maintained? It can't just happen on its own and then expect human beings to be perfectly okay with it. You have to really think ahead when you're designing life systems. And, you know, today's construction doesn't think that far ahead, regrettably.
And when you say, Stephen, that you are you catch the research and you integrate within the architectural or urban project, how do you do that? Do you read papers, or do you directly collaborate with a research lab?
Yeah, first of all, we have a subscription to Nature magazine, so we leave copies of that lying around, and we try and get the architects interested in, you know, in the cool images that you see in publications like that. I think that's always good for the general culture. But then, yes, we developed particular sort of think tank teams with people like Philippe Clergeau, who we wrote a paper with on the public perception of biodiversity, which is important because we had this reaction, you know, we want to do biodiversity, and then it's, oh my God, you know, mosquitoes, pigeon poo, who rakes up the leaves, you know, all of the negative aspects. So we said, well, we have to, so we got an anthropologist, Richard Raymond, and we did a survey using OpinionWay, and we tried to get some answers to find out what it is that people were prepared to accept in terms of a comfort level, what kind of nature they were prepared to have, and within what proximity to their living space. So we had to sort of do that research to find out what we could do. But that was a particular research unit, a particular sort of think tank project with partners from the CNRS and from the Musée. When it comes to working with particular products like timber, obviously the actors are going to be different. It's going to be more engineers, it's going to be more forestry management people who will be telling us what is the best timber to use, and biologists as well, telling us about the microbial profile of wood. You know, what's going to be living in the wood that we can't even see, that's going to give us an impact on our health. You know, we believe that wood is good for your health, whereas conventional wisdom has been telling us that it's you know, we need PVC to be healthy, which is just total rubbish. So, you know, every time we have a project, we have a different group of people around the table, and we try to develop our knowledge a little bit using using a collective intelligence model, which is fascinating because I love sitting talking to biologists. You know.
Okay, so
there's so many amazing things being discovered all the time in biology. I mean, it feels like we're only beginning to discover just how intelligent the natural world is. It's just we talk about smart cities. I mean, let's keep looking at nature, guys. It's much more interesting. It's much more interesting.
And is it in general for a difficulty to work with many different stakeholders, or in more widely, what are the main difficulties in order to enhance regenerative practice? At the beginning with the LBC, we talk about law and regulation. Stephen, you are you say you interact with many different stakeholders, and the client requirements are changing each time. So in all these different projects, did you notice that there is one or two challenges that we need to overcome in order to enhance the development of restorative projects?
Yeah, I was thinking on the question. I think it is the mind of people, because as Marc said, you have a big green space with a lot of water. Yeah, but it's going to be a lot of mosquitoes, or I don't know, or maybe security problems. But it's not at all. But it's in the mind of the people. So we need to convince all these companies and architects and engineers and all these people that this is not the actual situation. This is not going to happen, because we know the research are there, the results are here. So we need to trust these people, and it's all, because this is the most difficult part, because someone is going to say something that I don't trust you because you don't have the research and you don't have the results. I don't know, but we have a lot of things. As Stephen said, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of information. So we need to trust, and we need to apply them in the projects.
So training is an important part of developing the Living Building Challenge certification. And would you say that it's mostly at the beginning of, or during the whole design process, you need to bring new knowledge, and how do you, at which moment you feel a kind of déclic of the people to start learning by themselves and get involved in the démarche? Or is it since the beginning, or?
It starts at the beginning of the discussion. Really, the even now, because maybe there is someone there and is thinking about the certification. It starts now. We need to start the discussion now, because we have a lot of things to think. We have a lot of experiences that people, experts, to talk with experts, and I think it starts even before the first draw of the building, of the project. And we need to continue all this strategy in every phase of the project, because as the Living Building said, the certification is given, but at the end of 12 months of using the building. So we need to prove that it's working. But all this process need to in order to guarantee this process, we need to follow at every stage of the conception. But it starts now. We are actually discussing with a lot of people, and sometimes they're saying that is really hard to have this certification, because we need to guarantee and everything. But it starts now. It is the experience with a lot of all the kind of certifications. If we want to achieve the result, we need to think now and to try to define how the project is going to be.
Yeah. Can I say that I really agree with this? No, but I've been working for 10 years on this kind of nature-based project, etc. And what I see is that the priority is the political will and the people that want to achieve it. And even if there are regulation, even if there are some costs, it works when people really want it. And it's for elective representative in cities, for example, the one that really have this political will, they will achieve the project, whatever are the regulations. And the one that don't want to achieve the project, they say it's too expensive. Okay, building a wetland, it will be expensive. Building a green roof, it will be expensive. But everything is expensive. I mean, a building architecture is expensive. Whatever we do, it's just a question of value. Do we put the money on nature and biodiversity, or do we put money on something else? It's a matter of value, not of cost.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you said. We need to think in a global situation, the global cost. I don't know if this is the exactly word to that, but we think every time how much is cost now. But the thing is not. The problem is not now. The problem is tomorrow. If we don't do it now, it's going to cost a lot of much money tomorrow. How we are seeing this problem actually with this pandemic situation is all because of that, because of the things that we're not thinking before, and we're seeing the consequence, and it costs a lot of money. So as you say, Marc, this is the thing.
Steven, your microphone is off.
Is it?
Yeah. It's fine now.
Should be okay. No, I just want to add something to that. You know, I think we should be looking at cities like forests. To make a nice comparison between a biological system, forest, and the city, forests, we used to think that they were all trees competing against each other, and now we know the last couple of decades have shown us that in fact this is an amazing collaborative system with carbon sharing and all sorts of things. Our cities should evolve to become more like the forest in terms of sharing between buildings. And I'm going to give you a very, very clear example. If you have an old office building which is being reconverted, you're going to be stripping out a bunch of stuff. A new building is being made into office space. Where is the technical floor, which is a kind of a big part of the thing, it's big on the carbon footprint, the technical floor, where are you going to get it from? Why don't you just get the one from the building which is being converted next door? It seems so obvious. It's a dead easy thing. However, you're going to get an insurance person who jumps in and says, no, I will not insure it. So there are barriers to doing the most obvious things to make the city more balanced, like a forest, like a natural ecosystem, more self-supportive, less silo designed, and more sharing. There are so many barriers like that. There are so many equivalents to the insurance person who puts up his hand and says, I'm not going to insure you, that, as you guys were saying, you have to get these conversations on the table straight away. You guys, okay, do you want a technical flaw? Yes, in that case, we're going to try and get one nearby. Is that okay with you? Bring your insurance guy to the table and we're going to do that. And you have to make these decisions much earlier on than you would usually make. And so it's a paradigm shift in the way in which we design, in order to get this kind of model. As you said, thinking ahead, thinking about reusing materials. These are totally new arenas that we have to develop and bring into the design equation much earlier than we're accustomed to doing. So it's a paradigm change. Sorry to give you such a banal example using a technical flaw, but that's just, it's actually happening all the time, this question. So.
Actually, this happens a lot of time,
yeah.
And it's everywhere. I heard this thing a lot of times. So what you said is completely the reality of the things.
Yeah.
Do you know if there are some ongoing studies about economic impact of restorative buildings, or did you have faced this challenge and you bring economic arguments to say, okay, it's going to cost to be expensive to build, for instance, some buildings of the Living Building Challenge, but to maintain or to renovate, or it will be less expensive. Yeah, do you have in mind some case like this?
It's a tricky question. I don't have a case study, but 3 years ago we tried to investigate that issue about the cost of nature-based solution. And what we tried to do, I say try because it's complicated. We compare the costs of in cities of gray infrastructure, classic one, with green infrastructure. For example, we did that for water management system. In one case, it's pipes, concrete tanks, and classic stuff. And in the other case, it will be ponds, vegetated ditches, and water retention, green space. And we compare the costs. We did that for riverbanks. We did that for green roof. We did that for green space. And what we observe is that in every case, the design cost and the management cost of nature-based solution is cheaper than for classic solution. So that's one argument to say that if you regulate water using green space, it will be cheaper than if you do it using pipes and using tanks. So that's a reality, and I think we should compare the cost of this. So of course, it can change if we take into account the maintenance. And maintaining gardens, green space, green roof, green walls is a lot of work. But I would say that what we hope, there's an ecologist called Jean-Claude Génaud that used to be one of my teachers, who say we have a problem in France. It's the over-management of nature. We always want to manage. We want to prune the trees when there's no need. We want to mow the grass when there's no need. And all of this is our costs, actually. So there's also this, I think we can save some money by less managing nature. And so that could be part of the answer.
I have maybe 2 examples of this approach. One of these is in a city that is named Los Angoelles. It's in the north of France. I think 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was completely devastated by the mining industry, the carbon and coal and everything like that. And the mayor of the city, he decided to start to restore the city, all the environment. And we using plants and trees and water and a lot of things. And today the city is completely different. And the economical value of that is not possible to measure it, because it brings a lot of more money, if I can use this word, that the real cost of this thing. Another example, and maybe Marc, you know me better than me, it was Paris, maybe 100 years ago. The Seine River, it was completely contaminated because there were a lot of industries and a lot of contamination. And the people who work there, they use a lot of strategies to try to recover. And these things happen in a lot of cities in Europe. And actually we have still problems to solve, but actually the city is completely different. It's completely developed. So this is the best example that I can use, and there is more examples in a lot of countries and cities. So, yeah.
And at the beginning, we were talking about training and education. What do you think? And this morning we were talking about the training school of the Coast Rester, and what is your point of view, or what do we need to change in education in order to develop this restorative architecture, since you come from diverse training, architecture, engineering, ecology, and do you think today it's well developed in these different trainings, and how do you implement?
Good question. I think, yeah, everything starts with education, and education of in schools of the youngest one. So you worked at the museum, and you know about what we call the citizen science, and I think that's one way, citizen science on nature, on biodiversity, and for young people in schools. That's a way to understand what is nature, and especially for urban people. So learn how to recognize simple birds, simple butterflies, simple earthworms, and so I think it starts with this education. Then for the older ones, when they go to high schools and to schools, I think there's been two less courses of ecology in architecture school. And that's something that Philippe Clergeau fight for, is bringing more ecology course and applied ecology course in architecture schools, in urban planning schools. And I'm happy because it's evolving now. It's been like 2-3 years that there are some course about that in school. And then the training for professionals, and that we were talking before.
Totally agree. We need to work more in this kind of training. You need to train or to explain in the schools for the kids, for the youngers, for every kind of population. We need to implement this kind of education, because we need this. And one of the good examples is the open. How do you say, the MOOC? Translation in English, I don't know exactly the translation in English, because we have a lot of free training, and it treats indoor environmental quality, indoor air quality, biodiversity. The last MOOC that was created, or the CBUs, and I think in the city of Paris, I work a lot with this MOOC. It was really interesting, and it was completely open and free for any people. So this is actually a really good thing, and we need to work more with these kind of things.
And I think the whole way in which we talk about nature has to shift a little bit. I think we still have the tendency to think about nature in a Darwinian sense, the survival of the fittest. This gave us the model, which was not very good, really, for the evolution of our species in the way in which socially and environmentally we've been behaving for the last century. The survival of the fittest species, we see ourselves as the dominant species. We have to change the whole way in which we talk about nature as being a model of collaboration. It's not, which bird flies the fastest or the highest. We have to look at the connectivity between all of the species and see it as a collaborative model, and try and make our cities and our society as a collaborative society, inspired by that. We still tend to see, an analytical pigeonholing of this species is good, this species is not good, this species is good, this one's not good. And, we're going through that right now. We're taking on a virus and we're saying this is a bad thing. We're so used to doing that. There are the good guys and the bad guys in nature, and we need to understand that they're all necessary. One way or another, they're all necessary, and we need to keep all the pieces of the puzzle. We can't just selectively throw out the ones that we don't want anymore. So we have to change the whole way in which we talk about nature, I think. And that's not easy.
Thank you. Any questions in the chat? Would you like to add last one question? Yes, we can read.
We have a question from the audience requesting what's the specific name of the city that Oscar was talking about just a little bit before. So the French city.
Los Ongoel. It's LOOSENGOHELLE. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We are going to spell it down on the chat. It was the only question we had.
Okay, so thank you very much for your participation to this roundtable. It was rich to have all these different point of view, and at the end for the closing, Olivier Schaeffer will bring an overview of the response challenges in order to develop restorative practice and all this topic we talk today.